Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Andrea and I are so happy to be back with you today, you folks in Contra Costa County, for session 2 of our critical time intervention training. We're thrilled you came back. We had a lot of positive feedback at the end of last session, and we really appreciate that. You know, training on Zoom is really a post-COVID thing, but it's always good to feel like we connected. And I know that we certainly felt a great connection with you and appreciated all of the feedback and input and examples you shared last time. And we hope we can have another Love Fest. So that's who me and Andrea are. We're still the same old social workers as last time. And similar to last time, we always are looking to hopefully give you ideas that get you excited about your work for today, right away, things you can use and provide you with tools you can use right away. We have a couple of tools we'll go through and information, you know, that will be relevant to what you're doing, because we know you're busy and training takes time. And we want this to be valuable and meaningful time for you. And because of that, we love any interaction, any feedback, any comments. Please chat, put your hand up, unmute yourself, start talking, whatever you want. We love seeing your faces. So turn your cameras on as much as possible. I know sometimes you don't feel camera ready, or being on camera is different. But especially we have a couple of breakouts today, just like last time. When you have the breakouts, there'll be smaller groups of 3 or 4 people. It's always nice then maybe to turn on your cameras. Make sure you put your name the way you'd like us to be addressed in your screen name, or we'll just call you what it says. Sometimes it just says iPhone, but whatever you want to be called. And again, don't wait for us to invite comments. Please act just the same way you did last week and share thoughts and ideas as they come up. So today is kind of like centering question, as I call these, is to type into the chat box, what's your favorite morning beverage? So you can see, what's your favorite morning beverage? Sometimes you get some interesting things here. We also see the difference in the generations. We see the difference in cultures. I myself am a coffee in the IV first thing in the morning.
Yeah, we got some serious love for pumpkin spice.
Opening the chat. So you guys, you can look on the chat and see what your colleagues are drinking. Hot chocolate. Good morning. Nice to see everyone smiles. Hot mocha with almond with whipped. I think that means cream. People have very, very elaborate coffee. Coffee, coffee, coffee. Good morning, everyone. Coffee, coffee, coffee. It is California, so we see a lot of coffee. Pressed coffee with hazelnut, not just any coffee. Venti iced coffee, pumpkin spice latte. It's back. Yes, it's fall already, believe it or not. I guess you guys know that because I think your kids are kind of back in school already. So that always feels to me like the beginning of fall. There's a water drinker. Still some more coffees. Strawberry acai. That's how you say that, right? With lemonade. Tea or protein, hot coffee, sweet tea with lemon. So we don't have any Red Bull drinkers, but we have seen people whose favorite morning drink is Red Bull. That's one that always kind of gets me. Ugh. I've only taken a sip of Red Bull once, but that shows my age. It's a young person's drink, but all right. Anyway, so hopefully everyone got their favorite cup of coffee or a beverage, favorite morning beverage this morning before we started. And if not, you know, if you need to take a break to get your gas in your tank, feel free. We did put the slides and the materials attached them to the invite. So hopefully you guys all got them who wanted to access the slides. So what are we doing today? What's the difference? We're going to do some recap of last week, because we know since last Wednesday, a lot has happened for you in your work days and probably in your personal time. And then we're going to go we finished last time on assessment and really talking about doing a CTI focused assessment. Oops, we've got a couple of, I think I can mute them. You can mute them too, Andrea.
Yes,
so
did it.
I just did it. going into, so now that you have the assessment leads to goal setting, to a plan with people. We call it a housing stabilization plan. You might call it a service plan. But how do you set goals with people that are real, that are CTI informed, that really help organize your work together and build motivation for the changes? And then we'll talk about linking to community resources and developing an individual resource list. So CTI is really about strengthening the network of care around a person, both formal and informal. And so we'll talk a little bit about what kinds of resources we want to be thinking about that support housing stabilization. And then we have a tool that you can use with your participants and that. And then we're going to start going deeper into the CTI phases. And the first phase of CTI, as we talked about last week, is called pre-CTI. So you think it's not CTI, but it is CTI. And that's the phase right before people move into housing. And it's an important phase. So we'll spend a little time on that before we break up. So keeping my eye on the chat. What did we talk about last time? Was a week ago. So we talked about CTI and what it is. And we really gave an overview of the practice and really overviewed a lot of concepts we're going to be coming back to in each session and go deeper on. That CTI is really focused on providing extra support around the transition from homelessness to housed for people, and that transitions are really tough and people need extra support. And there are also opportunities for change and growth. But the whole intervention is really focused on helping people make a good transition, build a solid foundation in their new housing. And what the research shows is that if we get people off on the right foot for those first 6 to 9 months, they're more likely to remain housed, to do better in a lot of other domains. And CTI is what's called a phased approach, a manualized approach. So there are 4 phases. We talked about that. And each phase, it's expected that the worker's frequency of contact is going to decrease. And we're going to step back because we are helping connect people up with a network of care. And they're getting more and more of their support from friends and family. They've got maybe a therapist, professional assistants, got some childcare, and we are backing off. The focus is on helping people learn to be good tenants, to follow their lease, to pay their rent, to deal with their landlord if they're not going to pay the rent. And we'll be talking about landlords a lot in session 4 later. But helping people really understand what it means to have a lease. And we asked a poll about how many of your participants have had a lease in their name, and quite a few people have not had a lease. So people need that education. We mentioned the network of supports. We'll keep hammering away on that. We also then went and sort of rounded out the session with a discussion of the key assessment domains. And in CTI, we focus our assessment. People present a million needs, but we focus on the domains that are most going to affect housing stabilization. So we look at money, we look at what people do with money, we look at their support networks, their informal supports and their family. We look at how their mental health and substance use issues affect their tenancy, right? So how do those conditions affect how their behavior is, and how does that affect their tenancy? And we also talk about benefits and think about benefits for people when we're doing, because we need to help people get as much resources as they possibly can, financial resources as well. But the other part of the assessment was also about understanding people's housing and homeless history. Do they have experience as a leaseholder, right? How long have they been homeless? What were they living like as a homeless person? Have they been living in their car for 2 years? It's going to be a big adjustment if they've been living in their car for 2 years versus, someone who's been briefly homeless, and maybe this is the first time. So we really want to understand what life was like while they were homeless. We want to know what caused their homelessness, because that's most likely to come up again. Whatever it was that causes homelessness the first time is likely to happen. And it might have been, I lost a job, or my car broke down, so I couldn't get to work, so I lost my job, so then I lost my housing, right? And so you have a car. So how are we going to plan to either have an emergency repair fund, get a better car, those kinds of things? So we want to understand those dynamics, not to re-traumatize people, but really to understand how we can talk about preventing another episode of homelessness going forward, because that's people's fear, is that they're going to fail when they move into housing. And that's a big transition issue, is helping people feel confident that they'll be able to succeed in their housing. Are there anybody want to put any comments in the chat box about last time? You guys put a lot of comments at the end. We have a quick poll that I'm going to pop up in a second,
I
but
got it. Okay.
oh, Andrea's going to pop it up. Are there other things people wanted to mention from last time that stuck with you, things you thought about? Maybe some people didn't get their morning coffee today.
How about I let, whoops, all right.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, you can still chat, put stuff in the chat while you answer the poll. I know many of you can push multiple buttons at once, just like me. So the poll, just in case you can't see it on your device, is which aspects of CTI most interest you? And it's a single choice, so you kind of have to read them all the options before picking. And you can pick other and then put a note in the chat. So our options are, I'll read them: assisting with transition issues, focused assessment, teaching tenancy skills to maintain housing, connecting to the network of care and support, the tenant goal and recovery focused as opposed to symptom driven practice, coordination with landlords and property management. This isn't everything of CTI, but these are a lot of things. Okay, so the polls coming in slow. Okay, oh, great, not slow. Oh, we're at almost 20 people. So I'll give it another few seconds. I know sometimes you're jumping around, or somebody's in your office, or somebody's talking to you. Okay, I think I'll end the poll. We had 21 out of 27. So, and 2 of the people are me and Andrea, so we don't answer the poll.
Yeah.
So let's see what people most interested in. Yes, teaching tenancy skills to maintain housing. That is fun. And that's something you can do in classes, in groups. You can bring in lawyers. You can have tenants who are successful tenants come back and talk to people about how they've resolved those issues. That is a fun activity. And it's also something people really come to, like it's not a service that's hard to sell to participants. They want to know how to follow a lease. They want to know, how do I deal with my landlord if I have a problem? What are the emergency resources that are available? How do I deal with my neighbors? So that's great. Okay. Then the second most popular was the assisting with transition. Yep. And really, I think that helps us focus so much our work, as if we really see this as a transition period for people. It helps the clients too, right? This is not how life is always going to feel, because you feel unsteady. You feel like, where are my bowls? Right? I just moved into my new place. I have a new kitchen. I don't know where anything is. I'm not organized. Where's my stuff? What's the best supermarket? Is my kid going to like this new school? Right? There's a lot of issues around that transition. So really helping to focus people to settle, right? And get those worries addressed. And then what's the next after that is the focused assessment. Okay, great. I think that I remember being a worker, and we had a terrible assessment form when I first started, and asked too many questions that weren't relevant, that people didn't want to answer, that I didn't want to write up to do this assessment that took 20 pages. So focused assessment sounds good to me too. Okay, great. Close this poll. And I think now I'm handing the baton over to Andrea.
Yep. Okay, so we're doing the assessment, we're doing a focused assessment. And one of the things that we want to do is really engage people around goal setting. And goal setting is a process. People are reluctant to tell us everything, which is not such a bad thing, right? And things open up over time. So we want to engage them. We want to get a little trust going. We want to make sure that people understand what services we bring. And one of the things that we can do to do that is to be really consistent, is to stick to the conversations that we agreed to be reliable, to be supportive, and to talk about what our role is and all of the things in the role in the context of what people are trying to do, which is basically building a place for themselves in the community that they can move forward in their life. So in order to do that, we need to know a little bit more about their life. So we want to listen to what each person is interested in, and we want to find something to work on together, because we can describe our role all we want, which is important, but we want people to experience the cooperation between the two, the partnership that goes into achieving goals. And the best way we can do that is start with small goals and give people an example of that. We always want to present housing as a way to get what they want. What's the connection of housing or a stable place and community to getting your kids back, or getting a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or increasing your income? How does that affect that? And then we want to find some comfort for people, something that's going to make them feel better, and that's a priority, because comfort is always a priority. And finally, we want to really keep showing up. We also have to consider people's backgrounds and ask people questions about their backgrounds, so that we can take that into account when we're setting these goals, because people's culture, people's race, people's gender are really going to affect what they want and how they see themselves as getting towards that. So we want to have those conversations. Okay. It's all part of really listening to who people are. All right. So we're talking about people with goals, and let's figure out, like, how committed are they to making the changes that they're going to need to make to accomplish these goals. And for that, we're using the stages of change. And you can see this. Are you guys familiar with the stages of change? Nod your heads a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So in pre-contemplation, people aren't aware of it. So you say to somebody in a shelter, can we talk about housing? And they say, I don't need housing. I like being homeless. I get 3 meals. I get a hot cot, 3 hots and a cot. I can spend my money the way I want. That's not what I want. Okay. So they don't have the interest. They don't see it as something that they're going to work towards. How likely is it that they're going to get down there and get all those documents that they need for housing if they think they want? Not likely at all. So we want to change that. And how we do it is we ask questions to raise awareness of both obstacles to the goal and the equity they have in goals. So tell me what you think housing might be like. So what do you like about being in a shelter? What do you imagine housing to be? How would it change? What are the positives? What are the negatives? We want to talk about asking them questions about, you complain a lot about the food. Is there something you like to cook? Have you ever had a place where you could do your own cooking? What did you think about that? Right? Or it might be, you're complaining about the showers and it's a drag sometimes to work with a bunch of other people around a shower. What about having your own shower and stuff like that? So we want to ask people questions. We want to raise their awareness. We want to ask what they think. And then as people begin to see that this might be a goal for them and there might be obstacles for it, we want the pros and cons of changing or not. It is both teaching people critical thinking skills, and it's also helping people make a decision to affirmatively select a goal. Preparation is when they think about it, they might want to change. Then we need to talk about options and strategies. And this is the most tempting phase, at least for me, because when people say, yeah, maybe I do want housing, great, let's go look at some places. But you know what? That might be important, but people really want to know their strategy, their supports, their services, how that's going to work. So you want to have a prolonged conversation about that. When people are beginning to change behavior and maybe willing to look at housing, then we want to support them. We also want to do some eviction prevention so that goal can stay constant. But we also want to look at new goals that people have when they're in housing, because goals give people a structure to their life. They define people's roles, they do other things. So we want to keep going on the goal. And so that's going to help you with that. And if people relapse or they go back to where they were thinking before, what we want to do is assess their change and reintervene accordingly. So this chart was particularly helpful to me because it combined sort of what are the strategies that you can use and what is the phase in stages of change. It also reaffirms that stages of change is designed around working with people who haven't made a decision about a goal or a problem. And so that's really important. We can work with people even before they decide it. They don't want housing, let's dump them. No, let's give them a chance. So that's what this is about. Does that make sense?
Well, and I think one other thing I would just add is you might have people who have been in housing for a couple months.
Yeah.
So they got through,
Mhm.
they're into action, right? And you guys are rapid rehousing. So most of your folks are hopefully are in preparation when you meet them, or maybe you're in action. I know some of you meet people before they actually move in. We learned that last time, but then people may start maybe not paying their rent, maybe making
Right.
too much noise in their units, maybe not being a good tenant, maybe starting to seem less invested in maintaining that housing, and they're not following the lease. And that's where they might be going back to a pre-contemplation or a contemplation stage in terms of their housing. And we do know people who say, "Oh, that's it. I can't make it, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the shelter." But for us, if we see that people are in that place, we're not going to do the same things that we would do if they were making strides to improve and continue to be a good tenant, right? So if somebody is really changing their behavior, following their lease and so on, we're going to act very differently from someone who's not. And that's what this is really all about, is really understanding our interventions need to be different depending on where the person is at.
Yep. And we got a couple of good comments. Not all, but some who are homeless do not want to use their income towards rent and bills and want to use their income towards purchase of alcohol, cigarettes. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So how do we use that? They're in pre-contemplation. It's a good example that Suzanne gave. They may not want to pay their rent. We also see that a lot in rapid rehousing when people are trying to get people jobs and they're not interested and they're not showing up. And they say things like, nah, you know what, you can just pay my rent for 6 months and then I'll go back to the shelter. So how do we interest people? So we ask questions, right? We ask questions, and that in order to make an affirmative decision to pay rent, people have got to appreciate the qualities of their housing. So we ask questions about their housing, right? To see if they like it and the benefits of paying rent and not paying rent.
Well, and
And
I
it,
think, just like alcohol and cigarettes take your money up, so do kids' clothes, sneakers for your kids. I think they use like most of your income,
yeah,
or car repairs, right? There may be other, or, it's important for you to get your hair and nails done because that's part of your self-esteem, and you got to pay rent. And most of our folks are really struggling, right? They don't have enough money to cover everything they need, and they have to prioritize. And, helping people get more income, right, can help them then meet more needs, right?
Mhm.
So helping people have those resources. Sure, people want to spend money on the things they enjoy. We all do. But is there a way that, we can help secure more resources? I've just been looking at, some of the things that people are they taking advantage of the food pantry? Are they taking advantage of free clothing banks? Are they taking advantage of things that can stretch their resources a little farther? Not that we necessarily want anybody to smoke any more cigarettes than they already do, but how can we help them stretch their resources so that they can meet the different needs that they have?
Yep. Ms. D. Struggs says that coordinating with clients to connect with community resources, and she's also specifically talking about treatment resources, mental health services, AOD, alcohol and other drugs, PTSD for adults and children and teens. Yep, we also want to connect people to those resources.
That was in response to the poll. I'm sorry we missed it before. I meant to
Whoops.
tell you. Okay, that's okay. But she checked other. So that was the part of CTI she was most interested in.
Good. Okay, we'll definitely talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about goal setting, right? We're looking at the stage the people are at. We use something called the so that principle, right? And it is, and we're going to use it in this context of the focus on stability in community and current crises. So we're going to ask people what they want, right? We're going to do it so that we can talk to people about what their goals are, and we're going to get those longer term goals. One of the problems that happens is when people are in shelters, what do they want? They want housing. Once they get housing, they got nothing else. And if they've got no other goals, it's really hard to establish that client worker relationship. So one of the things that we're going to ask people is, so you get housing, so that what happens? What do you imagine will happen when you get housing, right? And you're going to find out things. And those are the goals that are really meaningful for people. Sometimes they're long-term goals. Sometimes we can start working on those goals immediately. But most of the goals that come out of so that require connections with resources, and help people move towards their better goals. So we want to always connect housing with those long-term goals. So you get housing so that what? I get a boyfriend, I get my kids back, I have more money to live on, I feel safe. Those are their long-term, more intangible goals. And we want to do that with the so that principle. We need to get those long-term goals in order to make a plan that's meaningful to people. Because a partnership means that we know what's meaningful for us. We know what we're pushing, but what are they pushing? And so that's what we've got to know. And then we're going to focus on factors that affect stability. We're going to connect them to those long-term goals. We're going to look at previous episodes of homelessness to start to do some of that eviction prevention stuff. We are going to focus by phase, and we're going to use this plan towards intervention so that we are a predictable service. It helps define our roles. People know how to use us. We always want people to come to us as opposed to chasing them, and that this helps with that. And we're going to define the steps to reach the goals, because the other thing we're going to do is define success. So as they reach those small steps towards their goals, that gives people success. If people only see success as their long-term goal, like get a boyfriend, that's going to be a tough goal to measure, and that's not going to happen in a week. Well, I guess sometimes it does, but usually not a good one happens in a week. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to people about that, and we're going to identify these steps towards their goals so people can see progress. And so we can also there's always more than one route to a place. So we're going to figure out, maybe this isn't working. If this isn't going through, maybe there's something else that we can do that can also reach that goal. And then we're going to remember to bring in those resources, because all long-term goals require correct connections to resources. We're not going to be around for that long. And we want people to have their own network of care so they can sustain this. So that's an important part of what we're trying to build in the plan.
I want to just say, I think that most of your clients are required to have a monthly visit with you. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong. But ultimately, we want, even if services are required, we want people to really engage with us in the work together. And what Andrea is talking about is, really connecting people so that even if they are mandated to have a visit, that visit is meaningful. It's not a waste of time. It's actually a time when you can work on something with them. And people don't know necessarily what goals to set, right? And we may have to, and Andrea's going to talk more about it, really give them some good examples of things they can work on. People have had a million service plans in their life. They've had a million goals. When I was a caseworker, we used to write the goals for the clients. That's how it was. Not a good practice, right? And this is really about working in partnership to set goals that they really want. I mean, I worked with teenagers, and every 100% wanted to improve their independent living skills. Can you believe that? No, they didn't. That was our goal. So, but sometimes it's hard for people to establish that. And that's why we spend so much time talking about it, setting goals in the service plan.
So one of the things that we want to really help people work on is what's known as self-sufficiency, but it's also getting more control of their life, right? Is the setting the goals, sorry, veteran's still in there, partnership with the worker. It's in the partnership with the worker, and we take a look at different possibilities. We also want to connect people with sustainable services, and we want to talk about self-sufficiency in terms of the way we all live our lives. Is none of us is totally self-sufficient. We all depend on other people for something. And we want to think about how people can do that. We're not talking about that we want people to do everything by themselves. We're talking about how people can best use resources to accomplish what they want to accomplish. That includes us. We want to really acknowledge people, which is shared decision making, acknowledge their expertise. They know themselves better than anybody else. They are the expert. They can tell us. And we want to be sure that we really listen to that. And then we want to use that success to build people's confidence. If you think about your motivational interviewing skills, one of the things that's most important is people feel competent. And we do that by showing people how they're accomplishing things on the path to their goals, and then and then build confidence in terms of, that they can set these goals and that they can make other changes, because we want to use the success of the goals that we set initially to build on the success of the future goals. We always want to go for long-term stability, right? Long-term stability, what's going to affect people's lives is if they can stay in the community in housing, right? So that we are going to always bring in those housing goals and those sustainability goals into every goal that they bring up. We're going to assume people's role. We're going to help people assume roles and talk about roles and proactive roles like tenant, friend, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, mother, worker. Any of those roles bring expectations and they bring a structure and they give a path forward. So we want to help people do that. And we want to teach people how to do this rather than do. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. And we're going to assess people's skills and really focus on those skill building so they can make these connections that are sustainable and that work for them. We always want people to be a part of something. Being a part of the community and having a role in the community is really important to people. So we're going to work on structure and purpose and what people do during a normal day and how to move forward and connecting that to those long-term goals. And we're going to transition and recovery of life roles. Even if somebody's kids are in foster care, they can have a role in those kids' lives. And we want to build on that role. And we want to help people assume those roles that give them purpose, that they identify themselves as, and that are proactive. And we're trying to do that in every part of what we do.
How people have a role besides being a formerly homeless person.
Yeah.
Because that's not really a role, right? To be an advocate, maybe to be a peer. Some people want to give back, to be a parent again, to be a good citizen. Just a comment that came up in the chat box where you're talking about goals, and I think it's great suggestion from R. Weiss. Good pre-goal technique is to ask the person if they ever had a past goal that was successful and how they reached that goal.
That's
an excellent point.
That's a great point. It's a really great point.
And, it really goes to that competence, because we're looking for ways to use the service plan for people to be successful and feel confident and competent, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to not or inadequate. And then that can give them, as they go through this transition, some of the strength they need, and reinforcement to take on the tougher challenges.
So we're going to do a little breakout, and we're going to ask one person to share an example of something a participant is asking you as a personal goal, or in your own. Simple, not too complicated. This is
your own goal, you mean?
What?
Your own goal. Your own goal.
Simple, not too complicated. Okay. So for instance, the decision to have another child is this is probably not this space, but eating healthy, those sorts of things, those can really help. And then we're going to talk about those goals. So it can either be your goal, or it can be one of the client's goals that they're doing. And then you're going to ask for the reasons behind this goal. So you're going to use the so that principle. Ask them, so that what? Okay, this is what they want to do. So then what happens? and they want to do this, okay, so that this happens. And
Sometimes
then-
people say things they think we want to hear for the service plan, like,
That's right.
I want to go to substance abuse treatment. Now, I don't know. Most of the time when someone says it calmly like that, they're probably saying it just because they think that should be their goal in the service plan.
Yeah.
And when we ask that question, we're getting at what the motivation is, right?
Yeah.
And, really looking for something that's meaningful for people. It is really about countering that, oh, I'll just give a goal because I've had 1,000 service plans and I'll just put down a goal that it is not really meaningful for me. But to have that conversation, and also to let people know we don't want to predefine their goals. I mean, we do want to encourage a housing goal, and we're going to talk more about that. That there is some goal around housing, even if it's to move out of the place they're in. And we talked about that last time.
Mhm.
People may not be happy where they are because they had to settle because they didn't have a good credit history, or they just were homeless, or they were evicted. And maybe their goal is to go to another place. Maybe their goal is to stabilize where they are, but we certainly want to look for a housing goal. But then any other goals, we want to really understand how it's meaningful to people.
Because that meaningfulness, that motivation is something that's going to keep people focused on the goal, right? Okay, so the third person can be an observer. We're going to break you up in groups. Suzanne's going to stick it in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready to open the room. So if you don't know each other, I know a lot of you do know each other, but don't forget to introduce yourselves and maybe turn on your cameras if you can. And I'm going to open the rooms and we'll give you 10 minutes, and we'll give you a little warning before we ask you to come back. Okay.
I'm sorry you had that trouble.
This meeting is being recorded.
Go for it.
Aye. All right. So did you try that SODAP principle? How did it work? Yep. You want to give an example, JC?
Sure. I was on with Hikmat. I was in breakout room 4 with Hikmat and Marjorie.
Yep.
We kept it 100. What do you see yourself? What is it that you want to do? We know what we want for you, but what is that? Right? Marjorie, you can elaborate with me and for me.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you can ask them what are their goals, but then they really don't know. But what do you
That's
want
right.
to do? What do you want to do right now? And then, okay, I want housing. So what do you see yourself a year from now? And I want permanent housing. So what must we do to assist you in
Great.
sustaining housing? So it's like the questions, because sometimes when I ask them what their goals are, they're like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what do you mean what's my
Marjorie,
goal?
that question, like, what are the reasons behind this goal? We used a real life scenario. Marjorie and I talked about it when we were able to jump into the group again. And the guy said, I'm tired. I'm tired of using. I'm tired of being outside. I'm tired. I just want to get inside. He wants to die with some dignity, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can work with there, right? Comfort, safety, right? All of that stuff. So those are big goals.
And Hikmat brought up a good point about income.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hikmat, you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I'm working directly with the client, the preparation clients. So their goals is just housing. Like, I need housing first. They just wants to need somewhere to live. Then this is the only goal they think first.
Yep.
So they don't have any short or long-term goal. They just need a housing, because most of my clients, they are staying in a joint housing. So it's like for 6 months. So after 6 months, they don't know where they go.
Yeah. So getting them to think about what it would be like to maintain housing and working towards that is going to be really important.
Yeah. And the income part is really about
Huge.
making housing work too,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have any money, it's not really great to have a place if you have no money to do anything. It
And
looked
if you
like
want-
LaShundria was going to say something. Were you, or?
Oh, yeah, I can say something. We actually, in our group, we did a personal goal, and it's crazy how you don't automatically know that someone else has the same goal as you.
Yeah.
And then also, you could take your own personal goal, and when you come across a participant, the things that you want within yourself, you can kind of ask them, if these are the same goals, to see if, the goals are meeting up, or maybe make some suggestions for a goal. So we noticed with the personal goal that you can also apply that towards your participants and the things that they may want for themselves.
Yeah. So yeah, people are very similar, and these are all based on things that everybody would want. But it's also, yeah, and it's really important to get people to talk about that, about what they really want. If they can imagine it, they can move towards it, right? They've got to be able to see it. And if all you think is your goal is housing, like Hikmat says, it's really hard to get people focused on other things like increasing income. But we can put them together with the goals, but it's more real if people think about, when I go into housing, I'd like to have a TV. I don't know. I don't care what their long-term goal is, right? That I can watch TV. Okay, if you can watch TV, then we need to talk about increasing your income, right? So that we can work on those goals. And it gives you other things to work on, which are consistent with them maintaining housing. That's a great thing. And it's very similar. People want to be safe. People want to be happy. People want to be comfortable, right? Those are all basic goals. People want to be a part of something, and we can help them do that. But getting them to talk about that is really important.
I think also just when you're homeless, you're living day to day,
That's right.
Goal, like Hikmat said, goal. What do you mean my goal? My goal is to not die today, is to eat lunch, maybe get a bath, go to the bathroom, take a shower, whatever. And helping people start to see the future is a process. So like 5-year goals, forget about it for a lot of people. 5 years is like, might as well be eternity, right? So that also when we're working with people on the goals, that may be only a week, or maybe the goal for the next day, to take a walk for 5 minutes or something. It could be a very small goal, or to go to the food pantry tomorrow and pick up, a month's worth of groceries or whatever. May be very small, but that's as far as people can go. And part of what we're trying to help people do is connect to a future, right? And homelessness is very much in the moment. You live for the moment. You have what you have in the moment, and maybe you are planning, you're stockpiling food or supplies that you need and things like that, but for the most part you're very focused on the here and now. And that's a really big transition that we're trying to help people connect beyond just today, but it's got to grow incrementally. Like, people aren't going to go from having a goal for next week to then having a 5-year plan, right? They might start to set a goal for a week. Now, maybe I can set a goal by the end of 6 months. Maybe I want to have enough money to buy a car, right? Like, that's a long-term goal for some people, 6 months, right? So we are looking, we have that relativity for people of, where they're coming from in terms of their homelessness. I'm watching time fly, Andrea, so I'm going to stop talking and let you go on.
Yep. So when we make these goal plans, we talked about this. We want to limit the areas of intervention to, no more than 3 goals. We're working on 3 things at a time, right? Or 2 things at a time, or 1 thing at a time, depending on what people can tolerate, but no more than that. And we want to really get them to focus on things that impact housing. But long-term goals oftentimes do impact housing and can positively be affected by housing. So we want to make that linkage. And that we always want to think about their long-term goals. They want a car, they want a happy life in the community, they want these things. How do we get there from there? And how do we build on what we're getting now, which is the stable housing? We have to be aware that people sometimes lose motivation. Motivation is not a stagnant thing. Some just want to take a shower first. Yep, they want to take a shower. Okay, so how does that affect their long-term goals, being able to take a shower? I saw that in the chat box. having a shower that you can have your own stuff in, that you can have your own towels, that you can keep your towels there for a couple of days, that you can have it as clean as you want. Those are really important things to people, and we want to help people share that. It helps them look at the long-term goal. It also helps them to have hope. It's not always a linear process, but we're going to depend on this motivation to get people through. That's what gets people through this process. And we're always going to be mindful about moving from crisis. So JC says hope is essential. Absolutely. And it's hard to get people to engage in that. So we're always going to be aware that these are not crises. We're going to help people be more planful, which is the enemy of crisis, which is something we want to do. Okay.
And that's why we would talk with people about the things that have come up before. We know their homeless history. We know that that car might be breakdown. We know that that kid might need something for school that they didn't plan on, right? So how do we help people incorporate that into their plans and reduce the amount of crises in their life?
So when we design the plans, we do have a sample plan, but I really want to focus on role and resources here, because those are really important. A plan should always include the worker and the tenant role. They should know what to expect from their worker. We want to negotiate that role, how we're going to help them, and how we're going to work together. So we're going to plan them for about 2-month intervals, 2 to 3 months, if that's where you're going with that. Motivation as well. Yep. It should reflect the areas of the assessment. It's going to talk to people about where they wanted to work on it, what their motivation is, whatever came up in the assessment, what their skills are. It's going to prioritize the areas for work, and it's going to really encourage people not to take on everything at once, because that's a crisis mentality, right? We're going to prioritize this, which is hard for people. It's going to set timeframes so we can reevaluate and take a look at their successes or reframe their setbacks. But it's really important that it includes the worker's role. I am going to go to this appointment. Okay. I am going to go with you. We're going to figure out the waiting area. We're going to figure out how to talk to the worker you're going to go see. We're going to do this together. And then we're going to talk about what you can do the next time.
I think also, just to, there's a couple comments on encouragement and building motivation. And, I know you guys are familiar with motivational interviewing, in that we can help people's motivation isn't stagnant, and we can help build their motivation and help them be more motivated. And I think that's really a great tool that we have in the field, is to really work on that confidence and, helping people be more motivated, because they've often given up on themselves. And especially when they're homeless, they feel like failures, right? So it's hard to be motivated if you think you're not going to succeed. It's easier to be motivated if you think you'll be successful. Another one comment on timeframes are really good, because if you have this, you don't think you have forever. Yeah. And the timeframes of CTI is also to help people feel a sense of momentum and movement. Now you're in phase 1, now you're in phase 2, now you're in phase 3, and we're moving forward, and we're reevaluating this plan, which is the next slide, I think. Oh no, the resources, but we're reevaluating this plan every couple months, so that people have a sense of progress and that we can change the goal. We're gonna update this so frequently. If the goal isn't the right goal, or they're not meeting it, we can change that goal.
Yep. And we're going to also identify the resources, right? We're going to identify the resources at every stage of this. We talked about that long-term goals require connections to the resource, but to move through CTI, you want to slowly build people's network of care. So you want to start it as early as possible. And we're going to really define which resources people need or have access to. We're going to expand their resources. We're going to get to stuff like credit repair and legal services and financial planning. And we're going to help people get access to medical resources, but we're going to do them in the context of what they want, what they've identified their goals are, how it will help them reach that goal. But we're also going to help people do it by going with them. So that goes to, in the plan, what's the worker's role? Because we're doing a lot of skill building, because a lot of times people don't use resources because they're not that accessible, right? If you have to wait for 2 hours in an emergency to see a doctor, people are going to think twice about that, right? And so how do we manage that wait time? How do we manage talking to the receptionist? How do we manage getting the services that we need from the places that we're getting it? How do you manage it from a psychiatric clinic or a substance abuse clinic or SSI? How do you ask for what you need? We're going to build all those skills because that's just as important. We're also going to build the skills of people making these linkages so that as things come up after they're in rapid rehousing, they can make the linkages for themselves. In order to do that, we have to really witness how people are negotiating and really focus on those negotiating skills. Okay, let's go to the next one. We're also, this is a very important phase, which is evaluating the plan. We're going to document these steps. We're going to identify progress, but equally important is we're also going to renegotiate goals. You know, sometimes that the plan that we had, it looked great on paper, but it's just not working for the person. So we want to introduce the concept that they can try another method. They can try another way. And if we think about it, you know, all paths lead to the goal. So we're going to try different things. We're even going to try things that people suggest that, you know, we don't think will work because there's value in that, right? We're going to use sort of a rule out principle. Let's try these things. Everything is not going to work perfectly. And we're going to teach people how to try something else as opposed to walking away, which I see in a lot of homeless people is if the first thing doesn't work, right? Sort of a crisis mentality. Okay, I'm going to try this. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, I'll never get it. No, it just means you need to try another way. So we're going to renegotiate those goals. We're going to try to gauge their expectations. We're going to reframe those setbacks as learning opportunities. I used to tell my clients, you know, when psychiatrists are somebody that people think of as scary, but also smart. And I said, you know, psychiatrists, have you ever seen an R/O on a psychiatrist paper? Yeah. I said, that means rule out. What that means is we're going to try a bunch of different things. And if those work, great. And if they don't work, we're going to rule out those as the cause, right? So we're trying to do the same thing. We're going to rule out different ways to get it. And we're going to really boil it down to what works for them. So these are really important things about a goal. As I mentioned, we do have a sample plan. You got it in your stuff, but the most important thing is to get those roles down there, to know what their long-term goals are, and to evaluate the plan, but also to bring in those resources because we want to build that network of care right from the very beginning. So we have
Weiss says if your client has other members of their treatment or support team, these resources should also be aware of and part of the goal if possible. And it's not a HIPAA violation. And, you know, that's really the ideal is that the client has participant, whatever you want to call them, tenant, has one service plan, not one with you and one with their therapist and one with, you know, another place, but to really have one coordinated plan. So it's great if you can get those resources to be a part of the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's sort of 2 goals goes out the window if the other people have 5 goals each.
Yes. Okay, so I think I launched a poll.
Yes, you did. So it's what aspects of the CTI service or housing planning are you already incorporating in your work, and you want to check all that apply. So we talked about that principle, goal focused, limiting goals to 1 to 3, looking towards how long-term stability, identifying worker role, resource identification, and evaluating the plan and reframing any setbacks.
Okay. So
and it could be multiple
question. It's
yeah.
a long question, so we'll give some time for people to read it. And it's a multiple choice. So you don't have to, it's not forced to pick one. So that's always easier, I find, is we want to reflect on what you're already doing in your practice. I know some of you, because we heard last week already, really are implementing CTI in your agencies. So you may be doing a lot, but others of you are probably doing CTI practices, even though you are newly exposed to these ideas.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got about a quarter of the people. So I'm going to give it a little more time. A few more seconds, maybe another 10 seconds. I also need to get it. click on the poll and all that jazz. All right, I'm going to give it another 5 seconds. We have about 15 people participated in the poll. And then we're going to ask you a different question. So there's another poll coming right up after here. So don't close your poll button. All right. So the first poll.
And then the second question.
Well, we want to share the first result.
Let's share the results. So things that people are already incorporating into their work, the big one is looking towards long-term stability, which is great. That's really important, especially with this goal focused. The ones that follow it closely are identified role for the worker. Great. Resource identification, which is terrific. That's going to really help people maintain their housing and move towards housing. And then limiting goals from 1 to 3, which is good. It gives people a way to focus. And then the other ones that are coming up is identified role. Oh, I get it. Okay. So this is.
So there was the 2 questions. What are you already doing? And then what are you planning to do?
So what are you planning to do using the so that principle? That's great. You guys felt like that was helpful. Goal focused, which goes with that. Some people were limiting their goals. Identified role for the worker, resource identification, and evaluating the plan with and reframing any setbacks. Those are great. Okay. And then,
Great.
yep.
Oh, I thought you just went through both of them. Did you not?
I did. Sorry, I did. I lost my focus a minute. I'm sorry. Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm going to pick up.
Yep.
Okay, so we've mentioned resources numerous times, and we're going to mention it again, this time just to go a little deeper and talking about a tool that we have, I think that's going to be helpful for some of the folks you're working with. I think we've made these points already. Everybody needs support. Nobody is completely independent, right? You know, any kind of jazz people say about, you know, the goal is independence. None of us are independent. We're all rely on others. We have friends we call when we're happy, when we're sad. We have people who help us with our kids. We have people who help us out when we have snow well, snow, I guess not so much out there, but in New York, your neighbor might help you if you got a little snow to shovel, right? So we all need all different kinds of services and supports. And some of us, you know, need deeper supports. Maybe we need intensive healthcare or medical, but we do know from the research that community support is really what makes a difference. And I know a lot of people you're working with have sparse networks of support. That's why they've ended up homeless, because they don't have a lot of resources and they don't have a good network. And that's why building that up can really help them bounce back from the homelessness and also start to build a better life as they move into housing. So we want people, though, to manage their own resources and not have us always have to be an intermediary. And Andrea was talking a little bit about this before in the plan. We want to help people learn how to negotiate as well as we do for services, right? I know how to get what I want. I flatter the heck out of people. I'm very good at that. Even if there's almost nothing to flatter them on, I'll find something, right? Because if you acknowledge that, or just acknowledging maybe that they might be having a busy day and, you know, you're asking them for something and you have some empathy, but that helps you get what you want, right? So the goal is that we help teach people those tricks that we all use, right? And sometimes, you know, something happens and it's frustrating and you want to yell at the person, but you know, if you yell at the person, you think you've been waiting long now, you're going to wait 2 more hours. You start yelling versus if you were, you know, a little more sweet talking and, you know, understanding and saying, you know, I know you guys are backed up. I just have, you know, do you have any idea when I'm going to get in there? You're going to probably get a different response than if you yell your head off. So we want our folks that we're working with to really learn a lot of those strategies to advocate for resources, negotiate for resources. What do you do if you're unhappy with your doctor or with the service that was provided? How do you make that known? Do you just quit it, or do you go find a new person? Do you give feedback? Is there consumer satisfaction? So we are really trying to build this connectivity for folks and for them to feel connected and also feel like they have control and choice in what those connections are. And that's the full range. So one of the things that we have is a tool for a tenant resource list, and it really mirrors the CTI assessment domains and focus areas for the service plan, right? So it's kind of a web we're weaving for people, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of go through with people what they are currently have as far as resources and what they don't. Where are the gaps? And it's a place for also both formal and informal support. So I'm going to switch to that document now. It was attached to the invite. If anybody had trouble getting it from the invite or they want it, we are happy to. Thank you, Andrea. We are happy to send it out separately. I do see a comment in the choice in the
Yep.
chat choice in the chat.
There is. So this is from D. Struggs, Ms. D. Struggs. And when a client moves into their unit, they often or sometimes worry about maintaining their sobriety and getting in the habit of having a routine around paying their rent on time, paying bills, buying groceries. That's great. So having aftercare to help them connect to the right resources and yes, make healthier choices. Yep. So you want to talk to them about what life would look like, what a sober life would look like, right? They want to get sober so that what happens, and we want to connect those long-term goals because you're right, they are focused on and well should be paying rent and, you know, buying groceries and doing this stuff and just maintaining their housing. But there's other things that they may want, and that may be a bigger motivation to pursue these sorts of connections with aftercare. So we want to think about that.
Well, and connections also give structure and routine,
Yep.
right? So when you move
Yep.
into housing, it's like going from 60 to 0, right? Because all of a
Yep.
sudden you don't have to wait 2 hours for a shower, or you don't have to show up at the soup kitchen and wait online for lunch, or you can just open your fridge and eat and you can get a shower, right? So filling time very often can be a problem when people move in, and building that routine and resources can be part of that, right? Maybe they join a walking group. Maybe they find people, fishing seems to be very popular. I don't know if that's what
Very
you
popular.
find. Or, you know, some other kinds of activities that are going to help organize their time and fill their time and make friends at the same time. So this resource list is, it's a Word document, so you can edit it or use it if you find it helpful. It's by head of household, by person. There are things that reference children. I know many of you work with singles, some with families, some with both. This is really meant to be adjusted. So the first things are kind of emergency resources, right? What are the emergency resources? A friend, a neighbor, friend with the phone, social services, who can enter their home, who can take care of their kids if they have kids, who can care for their pet. Sometimes people's pets are more important than almost anything, treatment provider or legal assistant, and their emergency documents. And so this is a form to complete with a person, and you would fill it out. What do we have? What do we not have? And then also, where are those documents located? You know, we recommend everybody get, you know, I know some people don't like paper. And then we have people who lose every piece of paper they get. And then we have paper that's always wet, no matter, even if we're in Southern California where it never rains, but the paper's always wet. Why is the paper always wet, even in LA? I don't know. Because, so we recommend like an accordion, one of those plastic accordion files. Give that as a housewarming gift to people. Help them organize their documents in one place. They may not have a file cabinet. They may not be in that place yet, but some place where they can keep their ID cards and their benefit letters. And then if they have things like healthcare proxies, and somebody mentioned the man is tired and he wants to come inside to die before. And I know many of you serving families, but a lot of chronically homeless people are housed, you know, getting housed, and then they actually are dying inside because their immune systems change from coming inside. So you often find them getting sick. So things like a healthcare proxy and advance directive, this also gives an opportunity to talk with people about things that you might not want to bring up. You're just going over the form. Oh, do you have a healthcare proxy? Oh, do you have an advance directive right? So it becomes more like, it's less emotionally laden. I think there's something else in the chat. On each page is a different assessment area and domain. This is housing, the landlord name and their numbers. Support services is there's a support team in the housing, legal services, if they have any related, and then their housing documents similarly, where we really recommend landlords give a rent receipt if they can, a rent bill, but not everybody does, but keeping those things and those documents, their lease, their inspection forms, their housing plan, et cetera. I see stuff in the chat, Andrea. Is there
So
anything?
JC said, I like it. She likes this. And then Marjorie said organization is important. It also helps with mind clutter. Yes. And it's a very hard thing to do to organize these things.
Yes. And you'll see some things are in duplicate places. Like mind clutter it's a good point. I love that term. My mind feels pretty cluttered these days. But anyway, you'll see things in multiple categories because they relate in multiple categories. So we have financial resources, Social Security office, person helping with their applications, public assistance, medical assistance, a bank, emergency rental assistance or utility assistance, food bank, clothing bank, employer, person who helps with rep pay. You can go on. And, you have conversations, and sometimes this is going to take a few conversations with people, right? Because there's a lot here. I'm only on I guess page 3 now. There's still a few more pages to go. So that you might want to break this up over time. And there may be things in the list that don't exist that
Right.
your client has that doesn't exist. So change the form. Then similarly, where are those documents? Where is your award letter? Where are your benefits letters? Where do you keep your bank statements? What about your tax records, pay stubs, et cetera, et cetera. Oops, we got an extra page filled in here. So then we have medical. We go through the medical domains, your primary care provider, specialty care, dentist, ER, home care, pharmacy, and then your medical documents. Again, some of these are on previous previous pages. Advanced directive is there. Then we go through mental health. And I'm not going to read every category, but it's a similar structure, substance use and recovery resources. Where's your AA meeting? That's one of the big adjustments for people when they move into a new place is sometimes they need to find new meetings because they're in a different neighborhood, right? And they can't really get to where they used to be, who's their sponsor. But this is really about people having their own directory. You can keep a copy of it. You can make it a Google Doc and have it shared on the web. There's lots of things you can do with it to make it work, but it really gives people a sense of these are my resources. It also gives us an opportunity, like around substance use, maybe that hasn't come up before. And they haven't mentioned substance use, but you notice they really smell hungover a lot when you see them in the morning. This gives an entree into those conversations, or perhaps you're a little bit maybe not sure if you're seeing any mental health things, but you say, oh, do you have a psychiatrist? Have you seen one? So it kind of brings a non-threatening way to ask questions about resources and connections. And you say, we ask everybody the same questions. Then we've got education resources and we've got community connections. And this is a list that could go on, like where's their church or their synagogue or their mosque or their temple or whatever they would call it. Faith community, we highly recommend helping people make that connection if they're interested in it. Faith communities have a lot of resources and they have a lot of fellowship. And our tenants taught us, because we were very secular, that we needed to do more with helping them get connected to a faith community. And sometimes people move and they need to find a new place, right? Or maybe they're not so happy where they're going. Anyway, then we've got family, we've got camp, we've got childcare, sports, community center, vet center, library, food bank, pantry, dog park for the dog lovers in the room. And then, of course, you can always add to this document. Okay, so I think we got some positive feedback in here. I see a couple things in the chat. I think we've caught all of them. Okay. Great. So that's the tool. It's the individual resource list. I think I covered all these points when I was going over it. This could be too much for one sitting for people. So you might go through one section at a time. You might give it to the person to take home after your meeting and say, why don't we talk about this next time? Let them do some filling in on their own. Whatever way is going to maybe work best. Some people have really big issues with paperwork and literacy, and it's not going to be a good idea to give it to them to take home. It's going to be better to sit down and talk it through with people. And then as I said, it shows where they have a lot of supports. It also shows us gaps and where we may need to follow up, as well as a chance, and I did not highlight this, So do you like that doctor? Do you like that psychiatrist? Do you like that library that you go to? Do you like that AA meeting or NA meeting? You know, AA meetings and NA meetings are not all the same. They all have their own culture, right? And they're different age groups and different populations. So we want people to also, in the course of that, say, yeah, I got a meeting, but I don't like that meeting. I'd rather find a meeting with more people who are whatever. Sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you know, Suzanne's point about doing it over time, and don't put an expectation on yourself that you'll have every line filled out, right?
Yes. Or the participant, because that
Yeah,
is really
oh,
going to make them
especially the
feel,
participant.
that's going to
Yeah.
make them feel lesser,
Yeah,
right? So making clear that it's not like you have to have something on every line. Very good
Yeah.
point. Okay. All right. So in order to do that work, so let's talk about using those resources. So in addition to what we want to do with individuals, in order to do CTI, we need to have a good, I see some, I haven't seen everyone's faces, but I see some of you are old enough to know what a Rolodex is. Got a couple of laughs out of you there. Okay, I'm looking at all of you now. Some of you are not, so you would know that as contacts. Your contacts, who are your contacts? But back in the old days, you had a little roller with little cards in it and you locked it up in your desk at night so you didn't
That's
share it
right.
with anybody. No, I'm kidding. Only Andrea hoarded her resources, but
I did.
well, we finally would get them out of her hand, but we'd unlock her drawer at night and go and look in her Rolodex. But anyway, in order to do this work, you're going to learn a lot from your participants. They're going to have connections you don't even know about. They're going to use services that'll be new for you, but you also want to have a good bank of services because you will be starting with some households that really don't have any connections. They don't know where to get therapy. They don't know where to get immunizations for their kids or healthcare for their children, or maybe they need vet care cheap, which, for example, I know in California, there's a lot of pets. People have pets a lot. So,
Mhm.
so we have to have a good Rolodex or a contacts database. So we want to know what the programs are. We recommend visiting things, or at least somebody on your team visiting the program, so you know kind of what it's like. So you have a sense of where you're making referrals to. I never really like to refer people to a service I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
If you're going to be making a lot of referrals to a service, you might want to go over there and instead of having individual workers have to negotiate one-on-one, but to go over to the therapy clinic or the healthcare center, introduce your program, introduce your staff, say, we're going to be sending a lot of people. Can we set up maybe a referral process? Can we maybe expedite things? Can we have a point person? So you may want to be connecting on an organizational level to some of these resources that you use a lot. Employment, I think about, like, because a lot of people in rapid rehousing, they really need to make more money
Mhm.
and they need to get a better job, right? They need to get a certification. I feel like the homeless world, unless some of you might work at agencies that are very good at employment, in general, we're not very good at employment in the homeless world. And we need to do better making partnerships with workforce development boards, American Job Centers, those kinds of things. That would be an area I would definitely take a look at in your program and say, do we feel like we really know what's out there? Do we have good connections for resumes, for certification programs, for job fairs? So think about the resources your people really need and try to build out your own Rolodex of them. When you are referring people, you want to know, you're referring people to service, you want to explain your role, that you're also going to be checking in to see how it's going for people. So if you referred someone to a new therapist, you would explain that you're their housing case manager, again, with consent, with a rapid rehousing case manager, and try to plan jointly, do those joint service plans, and also share information so that you can coordinate services better, but also letting people know what they can expect from you, right?
Mhm.
So what does a therapist, obviously a therapist is not going to call you and tell you what was discussed in the therapy session, but they should know what they can call you for and tell you, as long as the person authorizes it. Or if, there's a consult, that you get, and you need that information in order to help plan, obviously there would be consent there, but you want to be very clear about your role, what you're going to do with information, and what people can expect from you. Are you going to drive people to every appointment? Are you going to show up? You know, you want to make sure they know that. So you also want to, and we talked about this last time in CTI, and this is not to infantilize people. It's because resources are important and we need to see how people do with negotiating them, is that we offer to accompany people to the first time they engage with a new service, right? So if somebody's going, say, to a medical clinic for the first time, we would offer to go with Andrea for that first visit to support her. And also to see, how does she do with it? Is she able to talk to the receptionist herself? Does she get, is she very good and calm when she has to wait 2 hours? Or does she start pacing and cursing and huffing and puffing and fussing? That's much more my style than Andrea's. She's a little calmer than me. But we want to see that, right? So we're accompanying people, not to infantilize them. We offer it. Some people may decline, but we want to offer that. And we, again, in CTI, we say we do this for everybody. And it's really so we can help you be the best advocate for yourself that you can, right? That's what we want to teach you, is how to really negotiate. And that gives us a sense of, we want to maintain a sense of how things are going with those resources. So in CTI, we would check in, if we had permission, with the therapist or psychiatrist or a medical doctor on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You know, maybe once a month, maybe once every other month. We're certainly checking in with landlords every month, right? So we want to build this into the relationship. We explain to people, why do you want to talk to my landlord every month? Well, not to spy on you, not to check in on you. So we have an early warning system. So we know if things are going south and we can intervene quickly. And we also know if things are going well. And then finally, you know, to keep your resources happy, you got to keep your promises. If you're offering to people that, you know, you'll get back to them within a day, or you have certain resources that they may be able to do, you certainly don't want to burn any bridges, right, for your clients. So we have a little poll on resources.
I
It's
can
been a
launch it.
whole, oh, yeah, okay. Been a whole, I don't know, 5 minutes since our last poll.
So it's about currently offering people to accompany them to appointments, first meeting with a landlord, new doctor visit, that sort of thing.
I don't see it, but I don't know if other people do.
You guys see, they're answering.
Okay, great. It's the co-host thing. Do you see it when I post a poll?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Huh.
All right.
So this is going pretty fast. We've got 18 of 23, 78%. Give it a couple of seconds. I just lost your screen.
I stopped to share just to see if I could see the poll.
Okay. So we got 20 of 23, and with Suzanne and I out, that's pretty good. Up, we got 21. Everybody answered. Okay. We're going to end the poll and share the results. Can you see that, Suzanne?
Yep. Yep. So do you currently offer to accompany people to appointments, to new resources, the first meeting with a landlord or a new doctor visit all the time? Already almost half of you are doing it all the time. Sometimes is right after that. So you're all offering it, at least on some level, depends. Only one person is not accompanying people. So, you know, that's something to think about. Think about that as you think about how you're going to apply CTI in your programs. I know, you know, everybody's really busy, and that takes more time to go with people. So, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we have the time to do that if we offer that to everyone. And think about it in your program if it's feasible. And, you know, sometimes, you know, maybe that's something that the team works out, is we know we have a few people who are going to the health clinic and one worker takes a few folks if they agree to go in a group or something like that, or to a resource. So keep your eyes on that. So I'm going to now shift gears, unless there's comments about, did we stop sharing the poll?
I did.
Okay. All right, good. Unless there's any comments on resources, we're going to move and start talking a little bit more about the phases of CTI, like the phases of the moon, right? So we have this image because it is the most intensive phase is pre-CTI, then a little less intensive is phase 1 when people move into the community. Phase 2 is try out and practicing, and phase 3 is termination or step down. Some of you, I think most of you are going to terminate with people after 6 to 9 months in housing, because that's when the housing program ends. Some of you may not, but CTI ends. And so that's an important thing to think about. And so these are the phases. I'm going to go a little deeper, and we're going to talk a little bit today about the pre-CTI phase. So pre-CTI is all the work that gets done with a person while they're homeless. Very fancy term for that. So they may be living unsheltered. I know out by where you guys are, there are a lot of unsheltered folks, including a lot of families who are unsheltered, and they may be unsheltered. Wherever they are, that's where this pre-CTI work goes on. I know we heard last week, some of you are working with people, connecting with them while they're homeless, while they're in shelter, while they're on the streets or in safe parking or whatever. But so, you know, sometimes you may end up doing some of these tasks. Sometimes the shelter may end up doing these tasks. Sometimes nobody's doing any of these tasks. So that's really when we've got a problem, is because what we know from the research is that the better work that gets done before housing, the better CTI intervention is. So you want to talk with your partners or where you get referrals from, if you're not involved, about how this gets done, and maybe seeking to partner to get that done. So we want people to know what the housing options and expectations are. That is right under the tenancy skills thing. And we recommend a lot when we work with shelters that they offer a tenancy skills class. And people will attend that. Maybe it's 3, 4, 5 sessions. And one of the things is, what are the expectations of being in housing? What are the expectations of a lease? We also, there should be a housing plan that's developed for people so that you do have goals and a housing plan. Somebody should be doing that assessment of housing and homeless history, connecting people up with income and benefits and documents and ID and all the things you need to make a housing situation work, all those documents. Then people need help with the search and negotiation. You know, we hear from some programs, well, we told them where the database was, or we have a listing book, so we gave it to them. And they don't know why people aren't finding a place. Well, as we talked about last session, some people have never looked for a place before. They've never had their own place before. They've always lived. Right now, about 25% of our homeless population is young moms between 18 and 25 years old. This may be the first time they're viewing apartments, signing a lease, negotiating. Same time, it might be a chronically homeless person who has not been in the process for a long time, has a lot of bad stuff in their background, and that they think is going to, you know, really put landlords off. And so they, you know, they need help getting through those interviews, or really getting supported through that process. So people may need assistance in that. And, you know, that's often what slows things down. So that's an important part of pre-CTI. And then starting to connect people up to supports, just like you guys have said over and over, people need these supports. They need a lot of connections. And then teach tenancy skills, right? So teaching people before they move into housing, what does it mean to have a lease? What does it mean to have a rapid rehousing subsidy? What does it mean, right? What does it mean to pay rent every month? What's your expected rent going to be, right? I think everybody's paying some portion of their rent, right? In the program, in the rapid rehousing, if they have income. Yes, they pay like 30% of their income for rent, maybe. Yeah, I see a couple of nodding heads. Okay. So we want people to, you know, really be prepared for all those things. So now the question is, one more poll for today, I think, is I'll launch it, Andrew, so we can both see it.
I got it. Yep.
It's up.
Yep. No, that's what
How
I meant.
many-
I'm sorry. I saw it.
How many of the people you're working with received or are receiving comprehensive pre-CTI services when they're homeless to learn tenancy skills and prepare to assume a lease? Okay, rolling in here.
Yeah.
Okay. We have about half of you. Give you another few seconds. Up, the number's going up, up, up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I know this is the time as you get onto the end of the second hour in training where things start to suck you away. So the needs in your program and your emails and the texts are starting to Everything's popping. All right, we're gonna end the poll so we can keep moving. Share the results. Wow, this is great results because most of your people are, in fact, most of you are finding that people are having good pre-CTI services, which is great. It is not the norm. Usually that's
Right.
something we have to end up talking with rapid rehousing programs of how do they work with the shelters to get the shelters and the outreach teams to do these services. So it's really great. And even that some are getting some people are getting those services is great. So, but of course there's still none. So that's another thing just thinking about as you're implementing CTI is thinking about what, because if you get people just when they're moving into housing and none of this work has been done, you're going to have to do that work. Now, we still recommend in phase one, you review a lease with people, you review tenancy obligations anyway. But if it's the first time people are hearing it, it's a little different than if they've had some really good preparation beforehand about what life is going to be like. So I'm already going into the next slide and talking about it without advancing the slides. So you got to assess what was done. Do people have all their documents? Do they have proof of income? Do they have ID? Do they have benefits? Do they know tenancy skills? Do they know what a lease is? And we really recommend, and CTI really is a proponent of the warm handoff. And I think you guys are very familiar with that concept. It's very popular in general, we find in practice in California, which is a three-way meeting between the shelter, the outreach worker who's been working with the person while they're homeless, the rapid rehousing worker, and the person, the participant, the client, the tenant. And that's to build a bridge in the relationship so that people don't fall through the cracks. It's an opportunity to talk for the worker who's working with the person while they're homeless about their successes. We want to structure these meetings, these warm handoffs. It's an opportunity to talk about any potential threats to tenancy that we know about, that, we know, Jim or Jane or Joe or whatever previously, had lost his job and, therefore, lost his housing, right? So he needs extra support around employment. We maybe need to build up an emergency fund because the kind of work he does, it's kind of sporadic, whatever that, I'm giving you an example, but what we want to talk about that, we want to make sure people know what their responsibilities are in housing. How much are they going to have to pay? How much are they going to have to see you? And what is the rapid rehousing worker's role? This is a good time for you to introduce yourself, explain how you can help people. And then also, what can people expect from that shelter worker or that outreach worker?
Yep.
Can they go back to the shelter and talk to the staff? Or is that not allowed? Is the shelter worker available to consult if you're seeing some behavior from this person that you're not quite sure about, or you want to ask something about maybe something that happened at the shelter? Can you call the shelter worker? If you have programs that you're getting regular referrals from, and I know you're all using coordinated entry systems of different sorts to get referrals, but you may end up getting a lot of referrals from a particular shelter or particular outreach team where you're finding that you're getting a lot of people and you're working closely with them. Well, then maybe you set up a regular weekly warm handoff meeting so that you have an opportunity to, regularly kind of do this work together. So very important is the warm handoff, especially if you're not doing the pre-CTI work. Okay. So now we're going to have another breakout and Andrea is going to set you up while I
Yep. Put the questions in the chat. So the first thing is it's going a little deeper on the last poll. It's what are you seeing in terms of services before people move in? Do they understand what their housing options are? Do they understand the expectations of their housing options like tenancy? Do they identify goals and long-term goals and develop a housing plan before they come into you? Do they assess their housing and homeless history, and is that given to you? Do they help them connect with income? Maybe it's benefits income, or do they start employment before people leave the shelter? Do they get all the documents together? Do they help with the housing search? And helping with the housing search is, once again, just not giving people leads. It's really helping with the housing search and going out with people. Do they connect people to resources, and could they start on that resource guide before people move in so that they have resources that are transportable? So, and teaching tenancy skills is here again. And then what are the gaps? What is missing? What do people do? And then what's missing? And then the third one is how is it communicated? So that's, what do you use? Do you use a warm handoff? Do you use ongoing consultants? Can you always call the shelter or the outreach team to say, look, this is going on, and what do you think? And how do people react to this before? Do they present to your housing team about what are the kinds of challenges and skills that people bring to this process? Do they give you their records? Records can be incredibly helpful, especially the case notes. Do they offer information when you ask them? What do you think how do you think people are going to respond to this? What's difficult for people? Do they do the coordinated entry application? Do they not communicate, or do they do other things? So what are the gaps, and how are people communicating? So the questions are in the chat. We're going to break you up into groups, and we're going to give you about, how long, Suzanne? 15 minutes?
No, because we only have 15 minutes left. So I'll give you about 10, because then we want to come back and debrief
10,
it.
yeah,
But
we
I'm
wanna
gonna recreate the breakout rooms, because I will make you a little smaller groups
Okay.
for this time. I hope that, sorry about what happened last time. Some people's breakout group, something was not working, but hopefully that won't happen. So we'll gonna recreate the rooms, and you should be in a room with 4 or 5 people, and we'll open the rooms, and we'll give you about 10 minutes to talk about how this is working, what the gaps are in your programs in your community.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a good conversation.
Was it a good conversation? Any reflections that came out of that conversation about the services that people are getting, gaps, how people
Yeah.
are communicating it? Gaps.
Yeah, if I can say so, Alicia and Myra were on, and we were just engaged in this conversation. We started hitting it off at the bat because we noticed that, we talked about, what it looks like for, wait, what was the question, first of all? I forgot the question.
What
are the
That first
services-
question.
what services people get for pre-CTI, what the gaps
okay.
are, and how you find
Yeah.
out about it.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that brought to mind for me, we do the educational piece when our tenants get housed and so forth. And we also go over that lease agreement with them. However, it just kind of triggered something for me. It's when a tenant gets housed and we go over the lease agreement. As we're signing the lease agreement, they're not listening.
No, they're not.
They just, so I just
Nope.
thought about it. It was like, they're not listening to me. So it just kind of triggered for me to do the lease agreement prior to. This is what a lease agreement looks like. If you get housed, this is what it is. And then again, when we go back over, just to highlight some things and to look at them to make sure that they understand what that lease agreement looks like. And then we talked about some of the gaps or some of the problems actually for us and our tenants, and sustaining housing is the good thing is our agency Hope Solutions because didn't house them. The bad part is they didn't get the education, but because we didn't house them, of course, we have to get all the kind of backlash of what's going and whatever, but we can always go back in and reiterate and have them relook at their list and stuff like that though. But if, we have to kind of take that extra step. And so those are some of the problems, but it just kind of gave me a lot of information and just kind of things like the way I need to change things a little bit with a lot of our clients is I need to go back and kind of do a refresher with some of our clients. So it was a great conversation.
Good.
That's great. So
yeah, and Alicia had a lot of feedback on it also.
That's wonderful. And that's a really good point is people don't hear anything, right? When you're doing the lease agreement, they don't hear a damn thing. They think
The day they're moving in, they're like, where's the grocery store?
Yeah.
Oh, she's cute.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Oh God, yeah. No kidding.
Our wives just said they had the answer to all ending homelessness in the world, but we cut them off and they lost it. All right.
Our wives, do you want to speak on that a little bit more? You want to say a little bit more what you were talking about?
So that's a motivational interviewing question, and I will say no.
Okay.
All right, just wanted to make sure it gave you the opportunity.
Thank you.
Other
Any
folks,
other-
yeah, go ahead.
Any other
Sorry.
comments? How about communication? How do they communicate with you? How do they let you know? Some of them are doing warm handoffs. How effective are those warm handoffs? Are they working?
Ms.
Would
D
you wanna-
Scruggs, Ms. D
Yeah,
Scruggs'
we
hand
got-
was up.
Okay, I
got-
didn't see her. Yeah.
For us, we do warm handoffs from one, if we have a client completing our organization, going into another organization, or getting support outside of our organization or within our organization. We do a warm handoff and try to titrate that client through the next 2-3 months to find out how everything is falling in place for them. How is the support network working for them, and who is their support network, and communicate with their support network as well to make sure that the client is obtaining and receiving all the amenities that is needed for them to succeed, to achieve, and to maintain after the aftercare ends, and
Yeah.
making sure that they can control, I can say, their mental behavior, your physical behavior, and your verbal behavior, because all that plays a part, especially when you've been homeless for over 13 years and you got to get back into a structure of life on life terms, and using the networks and the people and your support and the structure for the person for your client to succeed, not just for your client to succeed, but also the case manager as well.
Absolutely. It's a really good point that oftentimes homeless people survive by understanding what the structure is or what the system is and being able to work that system. So really integrating that into the warm handoffs is really important. How many people are getting the warm handoffs from the people that refer into your program when people are homeless? Because I think it's a really good point. Warm handoffs should be absolutely integrated into all the resource development. How many are you getting those? Are they helpful?
We do, for me, we do get warm handoffs, and we go back and forth with the person that gave us the warm handoff, just to get more clarity with that client,
Perfect.
about that client, for that client, and of the services that was rendered to that client prior to them coming to us, and also what was already in place, so we can keep that going. We won't lose no momentum, and also so that client won't fall in the cracks, because sometimes that happens. It's a quick doozy, especially when coming from one organization to another, or doing a warm handoff
Yeah.
within the organization or within the line structure that's needed or that's in their case plan.
So it sounds
So
like
it's-
it's well integrated into your practice, which is really important. And that's where we're trying to go. Once again, we have to cut people off because we're in your time right now. And
That's
we're
right.
going to say, we can't wait to see you next week. And thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys. We really appreciate it.
If you want to turn on your cameras just to wave goodbye, so we
Yeah.
can see you for
Thank
1
you.
second.
See you
Thank you
next
for putting
week.
your cameras on.
Thank
All of you
you.
would do that. It's nice to
Thank
see your
you.
faces.
Thank you.
We'll see you next Wednesday for breakfast.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you.
And she home.